a stare. We spoke of was and when, although I wasn't there. He said I was his friend, which came as some surprise. I spoke into his eyes. I thought you died alone a long, long time ago. Oh no, not me. I never lost control. Your face to face with the man who sold the world.
Chapter 10. Watermelon! Banana! A fruit huckster shouted as he followed his route through Philadelphia's dirt roads. Watermelon! Banana! Esquire and Patrick heard him from a block away. With a wink, the scrawny Price boys got into position. Patrick, the elder, took the string that had previously held his brother's newspapers and unfurled it, handing one end to Esquire and taking the other across the narrow cobblestone street. The slow gallop of the immigrant's horse grew closer. "Back up, Louis," Patrick warned from across the street. Patrick meant the world to him. Esquire ducked at his brother's orders and tightened their wire. Their father was lucky to maintain a factory job if he was willing to work 12-hour shifts. Both boys took their positions behind the steps of homes on opposite sides of the street. The trap was set. The huckster soon came crashing to the ground with a ringing bell. His donkey neighed and whinnied but did not move. Patrick and Esquire raided the cart for a treasure of bananas, apples, and peaches. "Stay down, old man," Patrick growled at the huckster. Esquire clung to the lone loaf of warm bread positioned with the man's personal belongings. Patrick thrusted his hands into the leather satchel containing the morning's revenue. He shoved the money in his pockets before hoisting the watermelon in the air and smashing it into the street for the thrill of it. Esquire watched the defeated huckster sitting in the street weeping, unable to give chase. He gradually disappeared from view, and the guilt became overshadowed by the smell of fresh bread. The Price boys arrived home earlier than their mother anticipated. She was choking back her tears while attempting to spruce up a pot of stew for the third consecutive day. It had boiled down to barley and a few hunks of potato. Her husband had not been home since the night before, and the front door opening startled her into drying her face. She gasped when she saw her smiling sons with their stolen goods. "Mother, we did so well today," Patrick exclaimed. "We wanted to buy you these." Louis was shocked at his brother's sudden change in demeanor. He envied the skill. Their mother could see in the younger Louis's eyes that something was wrong. She rifled through the bag of fruit that they would never have been able to afford without their paper route revenue. "How did you buy so much?" she asked. "We struck a deal," Patrick stated. While she loved his confidence, her eyes darted to the younger Louis for corroboration. He smiled and held up the loaf of bread. She nodded graciously, suppressing the moral dilemma rolling through her brain. She could not help but admire their initiative. Their father would not be sticking his neck out for the little extras. The boys retreated to their room with their mother's fresh, soft kisses on their cheeks. Patrick counted the take and added it to his secret box. "Do you think Giuseppe was okay?" Louis asked. "Who cares about that old wop? He'll be fine." Patrick continued counting and closed the box. It was enough to pay Giuseppe's rent for the week. "Are you sure?" Louis asked. "Yes. Did you see how happy Mom was?" Their bedroom door opened, and their mother appeared with buttered bread and sliced apples, warmed and sprinkled with the last bit of cinnamon in the cabinet. She did not ask about their absence from school. Instead, she kissed their foreheads and gave them each a plate. She left the room and sunk her teeth into a peach. The juice dripped onto her collarbone, and she let it roll. Her husband would not be returning. She checked the clock, straightened her dress, and left the house. Lewis watched her cross the street and enter the house of a young man. He stood watch at the front door for roughly 20 minutes until she exited. She hugged the man again in his doorway. Upon her return, she locked eyes with Lewis. She played it cool. Her stare reminded him that they were both keeping secrets. Both of them were avoiding a beating. Lewis could smell the whiskey on his father long before he stumbled past him and into the living room. He felt him trip over a pair of tiny shoes and in one swift motion lift him into the air before he began wailing on him. With every loud crack against Lewis's skin, his mother dissociated, thinking of the virile young neighbor striking his palm against her buttocks with each stroke, while she gripped the iron bed frame and stifled her moans into a bachelor's flat, sweat-stained pillow. She could not stick up for the boy for fear of drawing attention to herself, and the smell of another man that lingered on her. Instead, at dinner, she served the uneaten portion of the stolen loaf. Lewis sobbed, red-faced, watching his mother's hand smear butter across the remainder of the warm loaf. With each bite, crumbs stuck to his father's mustache. His parents smiled at one another longingly as his father rested his hand over his mother's. She was a master at hiding her guilt, smiling while she could feel the young man still seeping out of her. "You should have seen how happy Mother was," Lewis said through a sniffle. "That's right, boy," his father answered. "You should be learning to put food on the table. I'm sorry I was hard on you earlier." His father wobbled from angry drunk to sentimental buffoon. His mother locked eyes with him again. "I meant meeting the new neighbor," Lewis continued. His mother trembled and his father squinted at her, giving her a chance with his words, but revealing his verdict with his eyes. "New family move in?" he asked. "No, that boy across the street," Lewis answered. His father's rage exploded. "Lying whore!" He grabbed her blouse as he rose from the table and flung her to the floor. His brutal hands across her face did not last long as Patrick dove across his mother. Their father stopped and spat on them. Lewis remained in shock, waiting for his father to swing at him for breaking his heart. Instead, he sunk down eye level to the boy. "People are going to hate you." With that, he exited and marched across the street. Candlelight glowed from every window. Some fathers stood in the doorways of their homes, shielding their wives and children from the drama unfolding. The Price father slammed his fist against the young man's door. When it finally swung open, he grabbed the young teacher by the collar, pulled him out of the house, and fell backwards into the street. The young man toppled over with the father and threw an off-kilter jab before realizing the older man was clutching his chest. He died of a heart attack in the street. The Price family moved not long after the ordeal. The boys would mostly get into fights with the new neighbors, and the discipline in any of the homes near them was minimal. Esquire's disdain for his mother lasted well into adulthood, and while Patrick would visit, Esquire would send a card and pick up the telephone semi-annually. He split the bills with his brother not because he loved the woman, but because he believed in his moral obligation as a son to do so. She knew that he never forgave her for his father's death. When the teacher would sneak into their tiny apartment after the move, Esquire often heard his mother's suppressed, pleasured breaths, followed by soft cries of regret upon her lover's exit. He left home at 13 and found himself resting his head on the sofas of distant cousins or shopkeepers in charge of his odd jobs. Petty larceny kept him connected to Patrick, who, though tough, would not leave his mother's side until his schooling was complete. He always had her hold the bail money he needed for bar fights. Esquire learned from his brother to save money and save her life. He could appreciate the former, but the latter did not appeal to him until it could be monetized. Patrick's multiple divorces, 3 to be exact, made Esquire wonder if his brother was a serious person. He never forced a smile, and people seemed to like him. Perhaps he was fulfilled. Always tan in the middle of winter and gallivanting around Europe with a woman at least a decade younger would leave his resources exhausted upon death. Esquire hoped Patrick would appear at one of his affairs to see how his baby brother had learned to live the good life. He sent Rose instead. The interpretation from his sibling was a belief that Esquire was doing it for all the wrong reasons. This infuriated the younger Price as the sensation of inadequacy awoke his years of resentment toward his brother for living off of the investment in the organization and not wanting more. "Louis," Patrick would say, "you could have retired years ago. What are you waiting for?" He was embarrassed to tell his brother that he would not be content until he was a billionaire. Patrick would laugh. He died without a penny to his name, an estranged daughter, and the kind of enemies who attend your funeral.